You mentioned before, obviously, measuring and that sort of stuff. Is the measurement in the actions, or is it? It's hard to put a KPI or a statistic against it, isn't it? But
oh no, if you take if you take a word like progressive,
yep.
It's quite easy to look for elements in your preparation. Obviously, you can measure progress in terms of skill development. You can certainly measure it in the gym.
Yep.
You can measure it in all sorts of ways. So you can measure it empirically.
Yeah, for sure.
If you took, if you're looking at some sort of index about toughness, well, you might be able to measure it in an empirical, but you can actually reference to it all the time. At the end of a drill or something like that, you say, okay, how do we go?
Yeah.
Who was our best in that space? We're talking hard nose. Who trained the best? And you're trying to bring out the self-analysis,
yep.
or the analysis within the group, where players are analysing each other's performances and in their mind and rating them, saying, sure, well, he delivered then. And then when you say, okay, well, so you're really acknowledging good performance.
Yep.
And I guess at some point in time you can also, if you've got the maturity in the group, you can actually say, well, who came up short?
Yeah, yeah.
Now that's more confronting and that's harder. And there's a maturity in that. But if you're serious about high performance and improvement, you've got to acknowledge the good stuff that's going on, but you've also got to leach out the stuff where people are coming up a bit short.
Yeah,
so
sure.
So it is measurable, but it might be measurable in a subjective way, but it's measurable in the fact that you can deal with it all the time.
Yep.
If you did a 6-monthly review and said, okay, who's our hard-nosed player? Well, they're only going to remember what happened the week before. But if you're dealing with it, say minute by minute, every time you train, you get at the end of a session, or the end of a drill, or the end of a part of a training session, you say, okay, how do we go?
Yeah.
You can measure it. It's always subjective, but at least you're endeavouring to measure it in real time.
And always referring back to it.
You keep going back to it, and then the more you go back to it, the more the players realise that it's important. And then they think, oh, the selection might hang on this. If you tell them this is important when we select. Now, the biggest mistake the coach can make is if you say, oh, that's important, then you go and pick the guy that doesn't tackle or doesn't like contact or something like that. Then you weaken your own base in terms of delivering. My job is to deliver the team based against that criteria, because the players are saying that's important. We've agreed that they're all important to help us win, or to help us be successful over time or whatever. My job is to select against it and also recruit against it. So the hard decisions have to get made there.
Just in terms of that, if we talk about being able to incorporate that into a session a week and whatever, it's going to take a fair bit of planning, isn't it? Particularly in terms of, I guess, the feed. So if you're looking at an activity, you've got to be well planned in terms of the feedback that you give at the end of that activity, during the activity, or does it become quite intuitive after?
No, it's intuitive, and I think you've got, just what you got to drive as a leader. You've got to try and drive that in your staff.
Yep.
That they're going to that. It's quite easy to review a session from a skill perspective. Yep. We dropped too many balls or whatever. That's one way of reviewing it. But if you review it against attitude, that's another way. And you've got to be doing both. I don't think you have to do any extra preparation around it. You've got to be thinking in that space, because you're saying that's our opportunity to make our biggest biggest improvements is going to be in that space. So if you're not talking about it, then it's not important. The things that you talk about to the players, and if you don't, you've got to make sure you don't talk too much. It's quite easy to over-review and over-talk during training. You just got to keep going to the things that, look, it can be on. You can be practicing clean-out technique, and if someone takes a softer line, or they're not cleaning out exactly how you want it, the reference to hard-nosed or whatever can easily be incorporated in the coaching correction, the technical correction, with an attitude spin. So you can get to the words quite quickly. A word like progressive is okay. How do we go? What have we learned in this? What have we learned in this training session? Have we progressed? How do we go from a collective point of view, or progressive? Have we done better? We're hard nosed. Who are the words that we're using? Look, positivity is another word. And you say, well, how do you measure that? So it was easy. You say, okay, good session, guys. Okay, who are our best? Who are our best today in terms of being, you know, self-critical or positive or whatever?
Yep.
Tell me who they were. You know, and inevitably names will come up. They'll say, oh, that's great. You know, that's the second training session in a row for, you know, for Joe over there and da da da. And so, you know, and then as you develop the positivity around that, you can say, okay, is there anyone didn't give us, you know, budgeted performance? You see what comes out.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, obviously, initially, no one will say anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You won't get anyone. There'll be no negativity because that's, you know, that's sort of contrary to the positivity of it. But the reality is that to go forward, you've got to keep the whole thing about peer review is that you'll make more progresses from a coaching point of view. Everyone expects the coach to be critical and, you know, whatever. But when peers review each other, as they do in science and other things, peer review is a very important tool. And once you can create an environment where there's enough trust, the peer review in a coaching in a sports sense is quite powerful.
Yeah,
and you get more progress when players can review their peers in an honest way, positive or negative.
Yeah.
But the information's taken in an objective way, not a personal way.
Yeah,
You've got to have an fairly honest crew.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, if we just take a scenario, just in terms of the US, just say you finished coaching the Reds, you've gone on to coach internationally, and then you've ended up just accepting a contract on the east coast of the US. Now, obviously,
In New York.
Hey?
In New York. My favourite town. Yeah.
Obviously, just say you coach your college team in New York. The Sweet 16's in April. Your competition goes from September to November, and then it snows. So you really can't do anything from December really until probably mid-Feb. But the other thing is once your competition finishes, how do you keep a team, or how would you keep a team motivated leading into that Sweet 16, given that you've got 3 months really of non-competition games?
Well, it depends on what your focus is. It's really where your message is. You could take it as you could take the whole situation as a negative in terms of teamwork, but then, the weather's poor at that time of year, so you could take it as a positive. You're not out there slogging away in minus 15 degrees, so there's an upside there. But there's some, the sports facilities are quite. I mean, going indoors is certainly a way that you can keep at least the unit parts of your game maybe moving forward. Things like line out and those base skills. There's an opportunity to be fresher. There's an opportunity to be stronger. There's a bunch of opportunities that you can have over your opponents that might offset got some of the cohesion. Then you'd have to look at how you're playing the game, because you've got that gap in time. You've got to have a game that you can resuscitate based on the weather. And there's no different to actually Europe. In Europe, you play all the way through that cycle, but the reality is that sort of late December, January, February is severely impeded by weather anyway. So that teams that are in that environment are making compromises anyway in terms of how they train. They're on artificial tracks, etc. So they might get theoretically some progress in terms of continuity, but in terms of developing the game, the question is what style of game's on at that time. Yeah, for sure. It can be a negative, it can be a positive. It really depends on your mindset around it. You really want to focus your mindset around, we'll be fresher, we won't have any injuries, all their guys will be back ready to go, etc., etc. So you can really get your mindset around that and say, you'd probably just have to make sure you've got a game that you can resuscitate quickly. So you're probably not going to have an overly complicated game, one that you can get back on the park and try and play to the fact that you're fresher, stronger, potentially faster. You've actually benefited from basically a pre-season that you can have.
Mid-season, pre-season.
Exactly right. Yeah. And try and benefit from that.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Well, mate, thanks very much for that. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And good luck to the season.
Thanks.